As you may have heard, there is less than a week left in the 8-year run of President Bush. Polling indicates that he is highly unpopular. The news indicates why. Barack Obama has indicated some of the ways he plans to remedy the various dire situations that he inherits. But indications are ambiguous on one critical point. Will the Obama administration investigate and, if need be, prosecute criminal constitutional abuses by the Bush administration? It's time for the Rachel Maddow Show Lame Duck Watch, because we need clarity on these indications. Under Bush and Cheney, the U.S. government waterboarded prisoners, which is torture. And the U.S. government continues to hold prisoners without charging them with crimes. And the U.S. government tapped the phones of Americans without obtaining required warrants. What will the Obama administration do to explain, answer, and, remedy those things? Well, that is among the leading questions at the Obama transition's website, change.gov. There are responses from both Vice President-elect Biden and President-elect Obama posted on the website, but response plus response doesn't add up to answer. Says the VP-elect on change.gov, quote, the questions of whether or not a criminal act has been committed or a very, very, very bad judgment has been engaged in is something the Justice Department decides. Barack Obama and I, our President-elect Obama and I, are not sitting thinking about the past. We're focusing on the future. I'm not ruling prosecution in, and I'm not ruling it out. So much for Mr. Biden, Mr. President-elect.
Obviously, we're going to be looking at past practices, and I don't believe that anybody is above the law. On the other hand, I also have a belief that we need to look forward as opposed to looking backwards.
So, yes but no? We will investigate, but we won't? Confused. And then there's Dawn Johnson, the new administration's chief of the Office of Legal Counsel. She wrote this earlier this year, quote, we must avoid any temptation simply to move on. We must instead be honest with ourselves and the world as we condemn our nation's past transgressions and reject Bush's corruption of our American ideals. Our constitutional democracy cannot survive with a government shrouded in secrecy, nor can our nation's honor be restored without full disclosure. Well, according to the Justice Department website, Dawn Johnson's job will be to, quote, provide legal advice to the president. Does that mean that she will have the president's ear when it comes to holding the Bush administration accountable for its actions? These are some mighty inconclusive tea leaves we have to read here. Joining us now to help us read them is Dahlia Lithwick, senior editor at Slate.com. She just wrote about the question of whether to investigate our soon-to-be former president for the New York Times. Dahlia, a pleasure to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having me, Rachel.
Among all these mixed messages, who do you think in the administration we should look to for clarity on this question about what they're going to do? Should it be the Attorney General pick, Eric Holder, the Office of Legal Counsel head, Dawn Johnson, the president himself? What do you think?
Well, certainly we'll know a lot more after Thursday's confirmation hearings for Holder. I mean, one of the things that I hope happens, and I hope it happens the first second of the confirmation hearing, is I want Holder to be asked the question that Attorney General Michael Mukasey refused to answer, which is waterboarding torture? I want to hear him answer those kinds of questions. These are very unambiguous legal questions that have been really muddied over the past 8 years. And so I think one of the things we're going to get at least some guidance on is where Holder draws his lines, whether the goalposts have moved irrevocably post-Mukasey, post-Alberto Gonzales, or if the goalposts are going to move back to where they used to be in the era of Geneva Conventions, torture statute, and so forth.
So many of the arguments against prosecutions are political and stylistic in nature. This idea that you should not prosecute because that's looking backwards. You have other political goals that it might interfere with. But let me ask you about the legal case, not the political case, but the legal answer to the question, why prosecute?
Well, one of the things that's so intriguing to me about this whole conversation we're having, and as you point out, we had it in the New York Times on the op-ed page, as though this is an open legal question. Crimes happen. Should we prosecute or not? As though this is a really thorny one. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about this conversation is that, as you say, this isn't a legal conversation. If we were talking about a bank robbery and the arguments against prosecuting were, oh, well, those people were really stressed out. It was a crisis. They didn't think they were breaking the law. let's let bygones be bygones, let's just turn the page, you'd laugh at me. This is not a legal conversation. And so this is a pragmatic conversation, a political conversation, and that's fine. As a legal matter, I don't think there's any question, and I cited to it in my Times piece this week, laws have been broken. There are war crimes that have been committed. It seems that, as you say, at least 3 people were waterboarded. The ACLU has collected over 100,000 pages of documents linking the White House to torture policy. It's on their website. It's now come out in a book. Michael Ratner at the Center for Constitutional Rights has written a book laying out the case against Donald Rumsfeld. And one of the things that I think is so interesting, Rachel, is that we talk about this as though it's a game of Clue. Colonel Mustard, Lead Pipe, Conservatory, as though these are really, really, airy-fairy, very, very, very complicated, unprovable legal presumptions. There's hundreds and thousands of pages of documents. Let's roll them out, see what they say, and then if it warrants prosecution, let's prosecute. The notion that we don't even want to investigate, much less prosecute, is what's really astonishing to me.
And it would make for a great defense strategy for the next person who ostentatiously does something like this in the future, to be able to look back legally and say, you shouldn't even be prosecuting me. Look how you let these guys get away with when you had all this documentation about what they did. Dahlia Lithwick, senior editor at Slate.com, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.
It's my pleasure.